recorded, and we'll have to have the chat all over again when we have a formal meeting. But sure, what's on your mind?
Hi folks, so it seems, I'm just waiting to find out 100%, but it seems that IT was able to hit a go live, so we're going to resume recording, okay?
Okay, all right. Well, that will...
Thank you, folks.
Okay, Brandy, are we ready to go here, or?
Yep, you're good to go.
We're good to go. All right, so let's get this meeting underway. Thanks for the patience, and thanks for getting us set up. First item is the new term of the committee, and why don't we take off on that one? Judy, you want to start us off, and Rob?
Sure. This was something that was, thank you, Claire. This was something that was it was building on last month's discussion. So if anyone wants some background to go back and view the last meeting, but we are interested in updating or maybe like modernizing our town and gown scope and committee representation to reflect where our community is at now compared to when it was put together many years ago. Brian could speak to that. Some of the early discussion was around the reactive kind of language of the committee, that it was in response to issues that were arising or that might be arising, whereas we've been evolving into more of a relation building and student inclusion and community building between partners that can assist with that and contribute towards that. So we were looking at the, I'm sorry, Jake and Rob kindly offered to put heads together with me on that, but being a busy month for us, we did get the ball rolling. But as I said just before we started recording, my head was more in like a lot of the details and be more thorough. And Rob brought up the point that maybe we should at the very least discuss what would need to be passed through council in terms of a change, and maybe to know the timing on that, whether that needs to be done before the summer break or if that can wait until after the summer break. I mean, I know that's kind of when the election season really kicks off. So I don't know the timing and where we're at. So one of the things that I wanted to answer
do you want me to answer the timing
yes,
question
please.
first?
Thank you.
So my experience is that when the new council is elected, one of the first things that happens is that notices go out for people to apply for various committees. While that's going on, there has been in the past the review of the terms of reference for some of these committees. Not all of them, and I don't think Town and Gown has changed in years. But that's kind of the normal time when these things are reevaluated. Now, in terms of getting something done before the summer break, not likely, because I know I've got an item on the, in the process, and it won't be on the agenda until June the 13th. And I think we have one meeting after that, and then maybe one meeting in July. Now, that shouldn't discourage us, because we do pick up in September and in October. At that point, the council is what they call a lame duck. But that doesn't mean that council can't do certain things. And basically, council is prevented from sort of making changes in the budget, if you will, spending money things, But I think committee structure and those kind of things are quite okay for council to deal with. So even if we don't get it in front of council before the summer break, we can certainly get it in front of council after the summer break. And that's probably a really good time to just, reevaluate what needs to be done. So that gives you the timing. And now the question is, what do we think should be done? So carry on, Judy. I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, I think that was exactly what I needed to learn. I think at this point, I probably reach out to Colin Rob for the point that he raised about, I had raised in our group chat about, where should this committee fall? Like right now, and this isn't pointing any fingers anywhere, but right now I didn't even realize that in the terms, where is it here? The committee is under the primary staff. The staff resource for the committee is actually the supervisor of enforcement services. And that was a surprise to me, but perhaps not really if we look at what the original tasks and intentions were. But going forward, I just had some questions about maybe where the City of Barrie staff support, might be in the future for this committee.
I think that's a good point, and certainly you have history on your side. I think, this committee ends up reporting to Corporate and Finance Committee, which is a bit odd, but I think that's history. Wait a minute, maybe it reports to City Building. I think it should report to City Building. I'm wondering if
we currently report to FCS, but I agree with you, Claire, that in one of the changes, and this is one that we didn't discuss, Judy, but I think it's worth noting, is that it would make a lot more sense for this committee to report to City Building, because ultimately, isn't that our goal as Town and Gown, to build community between the student community and the rest of the city? So going to FCS is a little bit odd.
It is, yeah, and I think that's a very valid thing to put forward. Absolutely. Now that assumes that the committee structure is going to be the same after the election as it is now. Because we never did have a city building committee in the previous term of council. So that's somewhat up to the mayor and but it seems to be working pretty well. So I would imagine that we probably will have the same structure as we have now, but that's not guaranteed. But anyway, we can put that forward in our proposal in any event. What else were you thinking about in terms of changing the terms of reference for the committee?
Well, I don't know if we should continue talking about that point, or just for me to raise that I don't know how to do that next step. So, but I think that the staff involvement and awareness within other committees and other areas of the city would be really helpful, and bring in new ideas and engagement. But I wasn't sure if that's the same thing as going through the building committee and then having if the staff resource is the supervisor of enforcement services, and if this is best to fall under enforcement or a different department. I know we spoke with Access Barrie at one point. I'm not saying that should be the area within the city, but I wonder if they would need some time to consider that before we raise it.
Well,
or Rob, if you had any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I can jump in quickly.
Sure.
And so my consideration was that it may make more sense for this committee to have a staff liaison from development services as opposed to legislative and court services. But that's something I think for the group to discuss.
okay. Any thoughts on that? I think it makes good sense. If I think about the other committees that I'm on, we tend to have support from the clerk's office. And that's the sort of the recording, the minutes, you know, that kind of process. And that's the function that Brandy gives us here. And then we have, like I'm thinking about Heritage, we have a planner who is the Heritage planner, and he provides support to the committee on a more technical kind of basis. And then we invite specialists that we may need from time to time, or they invite themselves to talk about a certain topic. And I think that if we worked in parallel with that kind of scenario, that would work. We would have Brandy from the clerk's office doing the logistical support, and then we could have pick somebody. You know, it may be useful to have development services, although I don't think there's anybody really in planning or development services that deals with the college specifically. And enforcement.
I guess
go ahead.
my consideration in that suggestion was that zoning policy comes from development services ultimately. So if we're looking to be proactive and influence future policy as a result of the discussions within this committee, that conduit may make more sense and be far less reactive than working with the enforcement branch. And that's like, I mean, we appreciate everything that you do in enforcement, Jason. Please don't take any of this as a slight against what you do and your contribution to the committee. It's important and valued, and I don't want to disrespect that whatsoever.
And of course, Jason probably would end up with a standing invitation to come to the committee anyway. But Brian, does it make any difference to you? No? All right. I think, you know, Rob, I think you put your finger on a good suggestion here. So, and as part of our submission to council, we could definitely ask for somebody that's involved in zoning. That would be useful, I would think, especially now that they're working on the zoning bylaw. But yeah.
And to add to that, I think you'd said something that, and I know it wasn't like an informed response, you were just musing about it, but I wonder how many of the staffing roles are formally connected to the college and college relations. Like, where is that relationship?
I don't think there is one, frankly. I think it's, you know, it's as needed. You know, if Access Barrie is needed, then they do that. But there's no one person that is the czar of the college. No. And maybe that's not a bad suggestion, actually. That might be helpful. Jason.
I just wanted to throw a couple things out. First, I didn't realize the manager of enforcement was listed as the lead. I was invited in this years ago under previous counselors, just to be the staff liaison. So I don't know if we even knew that. That may go back a very long way, like a manager ago. And you do have representation. Sorry, Mike, you have Officer Gallagher from Developmental Services at every meeting as well, who's a zoning enforcement officer. Not to throw you under the bus, Mike.
True, and there aren't any buses here, but I think Rob's point is well taken, though. To move from a more of a reactive position to more of a proactive position, you know, we maybe should look at a different representation. So I think that's valid. You're on mute, Judy.
I know. So, like, what do we need to do? Like, is that something you would want to put out before council? I'm just thinking if we're recommending any changes for review in the fall, which would fall under like the normal review, there might be less to discuss or to like take pause at with our suggestions if there's some heads up notice about that recommendation, which is maybe a bit more significant than, you know, some of the objectives and the committee makeup.
Well, let me say that my expectation, what I think we should do is we should take our current terms of reference and rewrite them.
Okay.
And then put it to council and say, we recommend that the next committee function under these terms of reference. And I would, you know, we would fly it through the clerk's office probably, because they tend to be the people that review it from a staff and technical point of view. But once we've got it cleared through clerks, then I suspect that it would sail through council without any discussion particularly. Because I think that if we do the legwork and the hard work and the thinking, and we get it blessed by the clerk's office, I doubt council is going to raise any concerns about that.
Okay. So then this isn't a rush for like June to.
No, I would far sooner have a really good, well thought out document and do it in early September. Would be just fine. The other thing that we should think about is the committee makeup. I think that we, you know, like it's a Georgian College City combined committee, and then it has some public representatives on it as well. And I think the terms of reference even reference that it'll be the president of BHA and one other member. And, you know, BHA really, I'm not sure it exists anymore, or it's certainly not very active. And we also have a residents association, a Ward 1 residents association that's popped up its head. So we should think about how we address the citizen involvement. And I'd be interested in some discussion on that actually.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I'm not exactly sure how to ensure that you can gain representative community member participation. I think that's going to be the challenge, is finding a way to ensure that it is representative of both people who live in the near college area and people who are affected, but also people who want to live in that area. I don't know. Yeah, it's complex.
It is, and you know, and maybe what you do is you get two, and it's a question of how to get those people, whether you try to draw one from the formal residents association and draw one from the general public. I think we can try to discuss that a little bit.
I agree with that, the way you phrased it, Claire, because I think if we, as we've seen in this term, if it's limited to a formal association, that's like committing that association to participation in a role that we feel is very important. Right now, there are two community roles, and that's both myself and Jake, who also tend to, like, unofficially speak to relations with the library where I work, or Georgian College where Jake works, but most people might not see us as like those community members because of that employment. And I wonder if we might continue to have maybe a library representative and a representative from the college in a, in a student services capacity, in addition to the dean of students. And then instead of like delineating a residents association, just having community members, and those residents associations can be used to promote and invite members to, you know, apply. And I completely agree with you on the name change, because although I've worked in student life for like a decade and have been really involved in college relations in so many different places, and here in the city of Perry, when it came, more than one person sent the description to me, and I looked at it and said, town and gown. I don't do gowns, that's not me. And I had no idea until I read it, thinking, who else can I send this to? And then read the description and thought, oh my gosh, this is exactly where I would love to do this. But it was a complete turnoff to see town and gown. I had no idea. And I think maybe town and gown or like can be in the description. I think that would be important for those who want to research what it actually means. But I'm all for a name change.
Yep, I think that's there's a great idea, because I agree with you. The town and gown just puzzles people, even though it has a long history. But yeah, I mean, there's nothing wrong with a name change, and I'm going to let you guys suggest one. So it sounds like a pretty thorough reworking of the terms of reference is what you're working on, and I think that's really overdue and is probably really a great idea. Brian.
Thank you. Oh, I was going to actually, Brian, if it's all right, I also, in addition to your speaking, I have a question for you. So I don't know if, never mind, I just saw your hand up, so you actually had your own thoughts. Sorry.
No problem. I was just going to suggest, when we look at the community membership, when I think about the neighborhood, there's really two main groups within the neighborhood. One would be owner-occupied homes, and the other would be tenant-occupied homes. So it might be interesting, as we're looking at the terms of reference of who will be the part of the membership, do we look at trying to get community members from both of those groups? Because they both will bring some different perspectives, but also a chance to build some of that relationship. So just a thought on that might be worth exploring.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea too. That's worth looking into. All right, Judy, you wanted to say something or ask?
Brilliant, Brian. That's ding ding. That I love that suggestion. And then I wanted to ask about this, the student perspective or the student life perspective and student affairs. I really appreciated Jake recently informing our discussions from the EDI perspective, the equity, diversity, and inclusion perspective. And I would love to see some language that supports that role within the college, or that you know, the department or general philosophy and approach that, you know, members you know, selected in collaboration with a representative from EDI or something to that effect. But with Jake not here, he had in our discussion made a point to how might we ask students how they would like to represent themselves on the committee, and that I'm happy to be part of any outreach to discuss it, but I'm really not sure where to begin that discussion within the college to invite relevant and meaningful participation from any group. So you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, actually, it's a great point. And one of the things that we've started to do is we found we always relied just on our student association. They were an easy group to reach to get representation for committees or meetings. And what we've started trying to do is cast the net wider, if you will. So we're getting students that maybe aren't engaged at the same level as our student association, but obviously have certain passions. And there are a number of groups that have now been formed to try and get feedback from students outside of the student association. So they would be great groups that we could start to tackle. We have a director of equity, diversity, inclusion, and belonging now, Sula Levesque, and she's working with a group of students as well. So I think we've got some resources in place now that have happened within the past 6 months or so. that could help inform this and could get us some students that would be very engaged in that process. So it'll just be an ask to SULA to get one of those students to put it forward in front of the students.
I'd love to, thank you, Brian. I'd love to follow up with you about that and timing to over the next months to outreach to students, and not just in one week, because we might not capture, where the student life cycle is at. So yeah, I'd love to follow up with you about that, because that's a huge piece of the, yes, we would like students in the committee and we'd like them to be meaningful, but we can't prescribe that role. That's not what it's entirely unhelpful. So yeah, I'd love to follow up with you about that. And did you say it was the equity, diversity, inclusion, and belonging?
Yes.
I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think even our terms of reference has a specific reference to students from the Students' Union, our Students' Association, but it's never been very successful. We've never really had committed students to this committee. So reworking that is probably a good idea. Absolutely. All right. Any other discussion on that item? So my suggestion to the three of you is that feel free to take just take the whole existing terms of reference part and come back with a draft. If you want to fly it by me first, that's great. In fact, it's probably wise before, so that I'm at least informed of where you're going. And if you could do that sometime before the next meeting, and then we can spend a little time in June working on it or feeding back. I think we're on the right track here, and I think we could accomplish something. Okay. All right. All right. So, do you have enough direction, Rob and Judy, for now? If you need some, just give me a call or an email, and we can have a chat between now and the next meeting as well. All right. Let's then do the quick round table. Any updates, Brian, from Georgian College's side?
Sure. I know many of us have a hard stop at 11, so I'll be quick. I'll just give a quick update around the housing review. I think I mentioned it the last time that we were conducting a review. So that has now concluded, or the preliminary part has concluded. I'm briefing our senior team next week, and then we have a meeting coming up with the acting mayor and with Councillor Riepma, and I believe Councillor Morales is there as well, where we'll share the results and have a discussion about that. And I'd suggest after we've done that, Claire, we may want to bring the report to this group, and we can have the consultants come as well if you'd like to do a quick update on it.
Sure, I think that's a great idea.
And that's really it for me.
Will that be ready for next June, our next meeting?
It should be. We have the report, so we're just briefing the senior team next week, and then we have the meeting coming up with yourself. And then after that, I think we're good to then bring it forward.
Okay, all right, we'll do that.
Okay. And that's it for me.
That's it? All right. Jason, do you have anything, any updates?
I'll just keep it very brief as well. Our yard maintenance season has really started to pick up very quickly.
I've got the complaints already.
Yeah, and so have we. We do have our 7 MLEO1 officers trained on that yard maintenance. They have started doing some proactive yard maintenance complaints with the grass and weeds, debris, that sort of thing. Citywide, but obviously with a tight focus on the college area as well. Usually just due to all the rentals. And other than that, we have 6 summer students recruited. Most of them will be on the waterfront this year. Just making sure that all those laws are still being followed after 2 years of ramped up enforcement down there because of COVID. We figured it was good to keep people on their toes and not just let everything return to the way it was. So, but with our 7 full-time staff working all those rotating shifts and now covering some of the yard maintenance, that should really pick up our focus on that.
Okay. And Mr. Gallagher, anything from you?
Not much for me. Similar to last meeting, this is a time of year where we're seeing kind of an increase in people starting their spring projects. So we're keeping busy with that. These are things like widening driveways, people are installing sheds or fences. There's some location and height restrictions to those. So that's keeping us pretty busy. I have been connected with someone from Georgian College. I don't think she's ever been to one of these meetings, but her name's Sarah Stackhouse. She's a coordinator of social innovation and student success. She met with some of our planning team about some policy stuff, and they connected her with me about, she wanted to learn more about how to educate some of the students about rooming houses and things like that. So I hope to connect with her later this week about, go over some of that. And yeah, that's about it for me.
That's a great initiative. I think that's very helpful. Mike, anything from community safety and well-being?
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Sorry I missed the last couple of meetings. I've been filling in for my inspector, and so I couldn't find anyone else to attend, but I'll just try to be brief. We did have, there was an International Students Day just, I think it was about 3 weeks ago. We were asked to participate from Georgian College to bring police officers in. So just to meet with the students, whatnot, and tell them what we're all about. And so we had officers there from our recruiting services, as well as our auxiliary and citizens on patrol. And so we had set up a booth in the, I think it was in the gymnasium. It went, I was told it went really well. Staff Sergeant Linda Morehouse was there. So that was, there was a lot of interaction with the students. It went very well. And that just, I know you had a comment, there was a few months back that, or someone had mentioned in this committee that that was something that we used to do and we kind of got away from. So when the opportunity came up, we certainly made sure we had resources there. So certainly hoping to do that again in the fall time as well.
Yeah, I think that's a really great initiative and builds a real bridge with the students. I think it'll serve everybody well to do that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, okay. All right, any other items? Seeing none, we'll adjourn. And it looks like we're all going to make our 11 o'clock meetings. So, all right, and thank you very much, everybody, for coming, and we'll see you in June. If you need anything else in the meantime, just connect with me. Thank you, Brandy. And
Thank you for your patience.
no problem. And I don't know whether, did you hear me offer your services to circulate the invitation to the TGAO conference? Okay, if you would do that, that would help me a great deal.
Already on it.
Okay, I'm sure you are. Appreciate the support. Okay, thank you very much, everybody.
Thanks for the discussion.
We'll see you in a month. All right.